My name is James. I never thought that one day could destroy my entire family. Last winter, my father died. It happened unexpectedly. He had always been a strong man, so no one believed everything would end so quickly. After the funeral, we gathered in our family home. It was an old wooden house with a large porch and an apple tree in the yard. Our entire childhood had passed there. We were sitting in the living room when my older brother Michael suddenly stood up and said, "The house needs to be sold." At first I thought he was joking. "What do you mean?" I asked. He answered calmly, "Dad had debts, big debts. The only way to pay them off is to sell the house." I looked at my mother. She was silent and didn't raise her eyes. "This is our home," I said. "We grew up here." But my brother just shrugged. "It's just a house." A few days later, he brought a real estate agent. I tried to stop the sale. I offered to take a loan. I said we could pay everything gradually. But Michael didn't want to listen. A month later, the house was sold. On the day the keys were supposed to be handed to the new owners, I came to the house one last time. I just wanted to walk through the rooms and say goodbye. I went up to the attic. There, behind an old wooden beam, I noticed a box. It was covered in dust, as if no one had touched it for many years. Inside were old photographs, several letters, and one envelope. My name was written on it, and there was one more line. "Open only if the house is ever sold." It was a letter from my father. I sat down on the attic floor and began to read, and within a few minutes I realized one thing. Everything my brother had said was a lie. The letter began simply, "James, if you are reading this letter, it means the house has already been sold, and most likely it was not your decision." I froze. It felt as if my father had known this would happen one day. Then he wrote, "I know your older brother's character. Money has always been more important to him than family." With every line, the letter became more serious. My father explained that the house should never have been sold. In fact, there were no debts at all. Several years earlier, he had sold an old piece of land and kept the money. He wrote, "I left this money for your mother." But I didn't want Michael to know about it. The letter included the number of a bank safe deposit box and one more line. "You are the only one who has access to it." The amount my father mentioned was huge, almost $700,000. That meant only one thing. My brother had lied. He didn't sell the house because of debts. He did it for the money. That same evening, I went to see my mother and showed her the letter. She stayed silent for a long time, and then she started to cry. She said she had always felt that my father had left something, but she never knew where. The next day, Michael found out about the letter and came to my place. He was furious. He shouted that the letter meant nothing, that the house had already been sold and the money belonged to him. But I said only one sentence. "You sold the house. The money was left to me by Dad." He went silent. A week later, I did something he never expected. I bought our family home back. Now, it belonged to our family again. But on the documents, there was only one name. Mine. And that day, my brother understood one simple thing. Sometimes, greed costs more than any house. I thought everything was over. I had bought the house back. My mother had returned to live there again. It felt like justice had been restored. But I was wrong. 2 weeks later, the real estate agent called me. He said something strange. "James, your brother is trying to challenge the deal." At first, I didn't understand. It turned out that Michael had filed a lawsuit. He claimed that I had used hidden family money to buy the house back and that half of that money belonged to him. When I heard this, I wasn't even surprised. That was typical Michael. He always wanted more. But there was one problem. My father had thought of everything. When I read the letter again, I noticed another line that I hadn't paid attention to before. My father had written, "If Michael ever tries to take this money, show the lawyer the second envelope." I went back to the bank. Inside the same safe deposit box, there was another document. It was a notarized letter. In it, my father explained why he was leaving the money to me. He wrote that in the last few years, Michael had borrowed money from him, promising to return it, but never did. The total amount of those debts was almost $200,000. That was why my father decided that the rest of the money should stay with me and my mother. When the case finally went to court, it ended very quickly. The judge looked at the documents and said a simple sentence: "Your father's decision is completely legal." My brother lost the case. But the strangest thing happened later. A month later, Michael came to the house. He stood at the gate for a long time. I walked outside to meet him. He looked at the house, then at me, and quietly said, "Dad loved this house." I replied, "That's why I brought it back." He didn't say anything else and just walked away. And in that moment, I understood one thing. Sometimes people lose their family, not because someone took their home away, but because one day they chose money instead of family. I thought that after the court case, everything was truly over. Michael had lost the case and stopped showing up. My mother moved back into the house, the garden began to bloom again, and life slowly started returning to normal. But the peace didn't last long. One evening, while I was fixing the old fence in the yard, a car pulled up to the house. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. He introduced himself as a lawyer and said he represented the company that had bought our house before I bought it back. At first, I didn't understand why he was there. Then, he said something that made me uneasy. It turned out that when the house had first been sold, the buyers planned to demolish it and build a small shopping center on the land. When I bought the house back, their plans fell apart. Now, they were trying to find a legal way to get the land again. They offered me a huge amount of money for the property, far more than the house was actually worth. I stayed silent for a few seconds and looked around the yard. At the old apple tree my father had planted, the swing he built for my brother and me, and the porch where we used to sit together every summer. The lawyer repeated the amount again. It was enough money to completely change my life. But I calmly replied, "This house is not for sale." He looked at me with surprise, as if he couldn't understand why someone would refuse that kind of money. I said only one thing: some things can't be bought. He left, and I stood in the yard for a long time, looking at the house. In that moment, I finally understood why my father wanted to protect this place so much. It was never about the house. It was about the memory of family. Several months passed. Life slowly became calm again. My mother returned to taking care of the garden, and every morning the house filled with the smell of fresh coffee. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that everything had finally become the way it used to be many years ago. One autumn evening, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Michael was standing there. He looked very different from before. No expensive car, no confident smile I used to see. He stood there silently for a moment, as if he didn't know how to begin. Finally, he said quietly, "Can I come in?" We sat down in the kitchen. My mother came out of her room and looked at him. Michael stared at the table for a long time and then said, "I ruined everything. I only thought about money, and only after I lost everything did I understand what really mattered." The room became silent. I saw the way my mother looked at him and realized that to her, he was still her son. After a few seconds, she said softly, "This house was always for family, not for money." Michael raised his eyes. For the first time, he looked truly sincere. I looked at him and said, "If you came here for the house, it's not for sale. But if you came as a brother, then the door is always open." He didn't answer, but from his face, I could see that those words meant more to him than any amount of money. And that evening, for the first yes,